How's it going? Welcome back, my wonderful wise ones, to a special video today, and something that I've been sitting on for a while, something I've been thinking about, and I don't think I'm alone. I don't think I'm completely insane for making this video. But today I'm going to be talking about the entire Borderlands series and why I feel that Borderlands is in decline, a series in decline. And I just feel like nobody truly cares about Borderlands 4. It's very different compared to, the discussion around Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 3. And today I'm going to do a deep dive on the series, discuss what has changed, ranking all of the games from best to worst, and just discuss why people aren't that excited for Borderlands 4.
Remember, with great power, right.
And of course there are some people excited for Borderlands 4, especially a new generation of gamers. But to put it into perspective, I think Borderlands has just degraded and changed with age, just like everyone. We're not exactly as prime as we once were. Now, I grew up on Borderlands, and I have some very fond memories of playing Borderlands 2, especially with a group of close high school friends. We would go to school and we would just be thinking about Borderlands 2 all day, come back, get on Xbox Live on the 360 and just play through tons and tons of Borderlands 2. That was, peak multiplayer gaming back then, when it was exciting because the second game built upon everything that the first game touched on and just made it even better. But I think Borderlands 2 was lightning in a bottle. And I'm going to get to the major points with Borderlands in this video and why it hasn't exactly got better with age, it's only got worse. And that's also just because us as gamers who played Borderlands have got older, and the series fundamentally isn't exactly an adult series. So let's discuss all of this, okay? And if you want to hit some of that sweet nostalgia, does anyone remember this? When Borderlands was first just a concept, does anyone remember this trailer? Because it got me so excited for the possibility of what Borderlands could be, but it never reached that potential.
Why have you come here? Only fools and criminals come to this planet. This is a dangerous place. If the bandits don't get you, the wildlife will. You won't last long here. Not without help. Not without guns. A hell of a lot of guns. Why have you come here? You're looking for the vault, aren't you? You won't find it. I'll tell you the same thing I told all those who came before you. It doesn't exist.
Welcome back, my wonderful wise ones, and to new subscribers who are joining the community. Thank you very much and welcome. You are now officially a wise one, so hats off to you. You should be very proud of yourself. But if you're new here, I do video essays, gaming analysis, philosophical content, and video essays. If that sounds good to you, if you want something a little bit more detailed and analytical, you're in the right place right now. So do subscribe if you are considering and you're new. It would mean a great deal to me, as I put everything that I am into this channel, trying to make it go full time, and I would just appreciate you becoming a wise one. And what we do here is we break down games objectively, and I tell you if I have a biased opinion. So I do hope you subscribe. Like I said, that's all I ask today. And if you do enjoy this content, consider dropping a donation, as I am really trying to go full time with this channel, and it's very difficult putting, all of my hours into this. But let's discuss why Borderlands is a series in decline and why people don't seem to care about Borderlands 4.
Okay, let's go.
Borderlands 1 originally came out when I was 12 years old, okay? I'm 28 now, and I think a lot of people got into Borderlands around that age, between, maybe 9 to 15 to 16, somewhere around then. some older players as well, of course, but most of us got into the series, in like high school, junior high school, wherever you are, around that time period. And Borderlands 1 was such an interesting, creative idea originally. It was not just a looter shooter, and that type of looter shooter, going from one boss to the next, collecting tons of loot, that hasn't been done to death by this point. There isn't a ton of like games out there copy and pasting the same ideas, like Destiny or something like that. A looter shooter game was quite a fresh concept. So was, playing as, these original characters. Now everything, is character based, multiplayer character shooters. But back then it was such an interesting, unique take to have these different characters, different play styles in a multiplayer open world setting while adding looter shooter, boss, gauntlet type gameplay onto it. And then on top of that, you add this unique story, this unique setting and world design, art style. We haven't seen anything like this before. The kind of cartoonish comic book aesthetic of it is very standout, and that got a lot of people interested. Now, it is very different from the original concept, which looked to be more of a, standard kind of sci-fi adventure type game. But what we got was something very, very fun, single player or multiplayer. It was just good, okay? And the first game, although it had lots of jokes and, dark humor, it was quite tasteful with its humor. A lot of it was toilet humor, of course, but a lot of it was a little bit more darker in its tone, similar to maybe more Fallout than what Borderlands later became, where it literally was, poking fun at social media and YouTubers, being very on the nose and kind of losing its core world building and kind of, just breaking the wall, something that we would see in Deadpool or something. And that didn't exactly sit right with a lot of players, myself included, but some people liked the direction. But I think most people agree that after Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, the writing plummeted, and the same with the most recent Borderlands game, Borderlands 3, the writing just wasn't great. Now, the reason I bring all these points up is because Borderlands, as a concept was original, fun, and engaging, with a unique story, world building, and the gameplay was addicting, okay? It was just great, going from one boss to the next, collecting a bunch of guns. The enemy variations were really good. You were never fighting the same thing over and over again. Usually there was some variation. Speccing out your character was good in the first game. The, loot ratio was nice. And then Borderlands 2 came, and it just completely blew everything out of the water. I'll still never forget that opening, cinematic, that kind of cutscene with them on the train. It was just so good. The music slapped, and it was just like, Borderlands was back, but better than ever. And it was, because now we had Handsome Jack, and Handsome Jack was a pinnacle villain and perfect writing in the second game. He was this very, very cocky narcissist, capitalist. And Borderlands 2, kind of really nailed the theme of, mega corporations out in space, and the idea of hypercapitalism gone mad, mixed with this very kind of barbaric backwoods world of a frontier land, similar to like the Wild West or something. So it was nailing so many interesting themes. You had a giant city that could literally become a spaceship. You had the main city that literally could become like a flying town in the end. Like, so many cool concepts. The world design was great in the second game. The character variation was even better, with very memorable characters like Zero and stuff like that, different play styles, and the loot was even better, the bosses were even better, and the gunplay was just so much more better compared to the first one, with better elemental gameplay and all this stuff. It was just lightning in a bottle, good story, pretty good writing, funny most of the time, and a good villain. Now, I say all of that because it was good, but if you go back and play it now, you might feel a little bit different about it. And that's because, like I said, most of us played Borderlands when we were younger, when we were teenagers, and the style of Borderlands, the juvenile kind of humor of it, worked well for that age demographic. So for people coming into Borderlands 4, most of us are adults now, okay? And it just doesn't capture that same interest it did back when we were teenagers. But for newer gamers, it might still do that, okay? That's the point I really want to stress in this video.
I had to reach up to get to the cherry on the top. Got it. Oh, in the mouth. It was lovely. I don't think it's funny. Miss Goodall was delighted. I was delighted. The inspector was delighted. And Haribo was still snorting away like mad. Dig in. That was a bit rich, but okay. Really good. I don't like it very much.
Borderlands 2 was truly special, I think, because it really did nail that co-op fun gameplay loop of interesting bosses, but it had so many fan service moments in the second one, so many cool quests where you would go into the sewers and you would basically have to fight like the Teenage Mutant Turtles, lots of cool references and Easter eggs everywhere, and just the addicting nature of, making your character stronger was great in the second game, okay? And then we got the next game where you go to the moon. That was pretty good. It's more of the second one, but just in a different setting. I really liked that. They added better physics to the game, which I really appreciated at the time. And then we reached peak writing with Tales from the Borderlands from Telltale. And that game, I believe, is one of Telltale's best games. Next to The Walking Dead and The Wolf Among Us, I absolutely love that game, okay? The writing in it is absolutely peak. I fell in love with this game for a period of time because it wasn't just about, the addicting nature of Borderlands anymore, the gameplay cycle and the loop of that game that made it so fun, which is of course the gunplay, the different elements, taking down shields with an electric weapon, burning them with a fire weapon, collecting all of these different cool guns that do all of this crazy stuff, like you chuck it and it explodes like a grenade, or it walks around and shoots enemies for itself instead of you doing it. So many cool ideas in Borderlands, and then the unique world on top of it. This time around, it was about the actual core world design and the writing, the characters. And although it wasn't directly made by the same people at Borderlands, it was still in partnership with them, it was still co-developed by them, but it was a Telltale game. That's why the writing was so good back when they were at their peak as well. But this just showed how interesting the world of Borderlands could actually be. It wasn't just a bloated, capitalism is bad like we get with most games today, the Outer Worlds and all that kind of stuff, where it's done to death and it doesn't even feel like, an interesting sci-fi concept anymore because it's very close to reality with how all of these mega corporations are owning our very existence, and, society today has become very focused on materialism and capitalism, which I'm against, but hey ho, that's where we are. But it doesn't really hit the same, aesthetic of this kind of sci-fi corporations in space. It doesn't really hit the same tone as what Borderlands did, and that was because it had such a unique world. And, it wasn't just about corporations being bad, it was, political infighting between the corporations, then, kind of resource mining and all that kind of stuff. And this truly highlighted how interesting the world could be. And not just that, the humor in this game was on point. This was the writing I'd hoped Borderlands would go towards in the future. But what we got was Borderlands Tiny Tina's Adventure, where it became completely about toilet humor, easy jokes, all the dark humor being removed and all that kind of stuff, and the jokes just not landing anymore. And then of course we got Borderlands 3, which was a disaster for most people in my eyes. It's a fun game. The story in Borderlands 3, the characters in Borderlands 3, they just didn't hit home. And tonally, it was very much the same game that we've already played before, just with slightly better graphics. And when it's already about an art style, not about graphics, it becomes even more unimpressive. So saying all of that, here we are today in 2025, and Borderlands 4 is fast approaching. So the reason why I wanted to do this retrospective of the Borderlands series and, a Borderlands series review, look at all of the Borderlands games and then rank them, which I will do at the end of the video. And the reason why this is a little bit of a downer video, I usually don't try and make these kinds of videos, I try and be a little bit more upbeat, but I personally do feel that the Borderlands franchise is in decline. And the reason why nobody seems to care about Borderlands 4, are, the reasons I've kind of stated. It's kind of a slow degrading of the franchise over time. It's not because the gameplay itself is bad, the gameplay loop is still very much the same. The bosses encounters are slightly even better in the new game, but the core gameplay fundamentally remains the same. And the thing is, the writing, the characters, everything interesting about the world of Borderlands has already been kind of explored, and they never evolved and built upon those themes. Instead, they just kind of went back to what was safe in Borderlands. And because many of us grew up on the games at a much younger age, I think that this really needs to be targeted towards the new generation of gamers, but a lot of them didn't play Borderlands, so they aren't really excited about this. Hence why we're here right now, and why I feel that nobody really cares about Borderlands 4. It doesn't mean it's a bad game, it just means that it's kind of lost its momentum, it's lost its excitement. And the Borderlands movie certainly didn't help, because that was the last thing that we got from Borderlands, and it was a complete disaster and butchered many of the themes and the tone and the characters that we liked originally in the first two Borderlands games. So, let me know what you think about Borderlands 4 in the comments down below. I would really like to have a discussion, about this. But honestly, I've kind of made my peace with it. I absolutely adored Borderlands. Basically, like I said, from my teenage years to my early 20s. And it's not that I feel like I've completely outgrown the series, because you can still enjoy a gameplay even if you don't mesh with its writing or the world design as much. But the core gameplay loop of Borderlands hasn't had any evolution. And when you look at it from 2009 to where we are now, you would expect the game to actually change a little bit. Not just add new skills and new quirky guns and stuff like that, but fundamental big gameplay changes. But with Borderlands 4, all it's really done is now it's made it fully open world, so basically no loading screens, and that's just a technological uplift. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all that I've seen so far. The art style looks kind of like a little bit more washed out compared to what it used to be, because now it's Unreal Engine, and they're still trying to capture that same aesthetic, but it just looks a little bit, I don't know, I'm not sure about it, not like it used to. And just the gameplay fundamentally remains the same. And although they did say that they're trying to go back to its more darker, comedy aspects and a little bit more sharper writing, I've kind of lost faith in that even happening at this point, because many of the same people, just like how New Vegas is beloved, the same people who made the original game necessarily aren't working on this game. And it's all about, a time and a place. You can't expect to just replicate something perfectly. It doesn't work like that in anything in life. So for people holding out hope that the tone is exactly going to be like Borderlands 1 and 2, I think that's kind of just unrealistic. And I think that's where we are with Borderlands 4. It's just a shame, because if they evolved the gameplay, they, just did something fresh with the series, I think that a lot of people would be more excited. But from everything that I've seen, this is what people are saying. Borderlands 1 was unique, and there was nothing else like it at the time. I still miss the dark humor / tone of the original game. Borderlands 2 was lightning in a bottle. Yeah, I agree. And a grand slam. I don't think they'll ever able to replicate it. Borderlands 3 was trying too hard to be trendy. Hopefully Borderlands 4 can blaze its own trail and create its own identity. That's what I'm hoping for as well. It won't be a good game. Sorry for the reality check. Well, here's hoping he's wrong. But from the looks of it, I do think a lot of people just aren't happy with what happened to the Borderlands franchise. So I do hope you enjoyed that breakdown of the Borderlands series and why I feel like it is in decline right now. Many people are worried that Borderlands 4 is bad, or it won't be any good, and they're even wondering if it's worth playing Borderlands 4, because the price that they're asking for is quite ridiculous. And that's with gaming in general now. Prices have gone up because the dev time has increased. technology being used, makes games much harder to make and much more of a longer process, much more money invested into games today. That's why creativity has kind of lacked a lot in recent games and it's kind of stagnated. But from 2009 to Borderlands 4, fundamentally it's the same game. Even Call of Duty has evolved and added new innovation to its gameplay formula since that time. And I feel like Borderlands, if it wants to survive, it needs to capture a new audience, not the same Borderlands fans, because most of us have moved on, or we just feel like it doesn't align with what we want to play anymore. That's my own personal bias. I might be wrong. Some people might still absolutely love Borderlands, but I feel like because of the writing degrading across time, because the gameplay hasn't changed across time, and there's no new original ideas, I don't want to shell out $80 or $70, a big amount of money for pretty much the same game that I can just go back and play, and it's fundamentally the same game with better story, with better writing and world building and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I am. That's what I think has happened to the Borderlands franchise. Please let me know what you think down below. And now I'm going to rank all of the Borderlands games from best to worst to see where we might end up with Borderlands 4. So the first Borderlands game is of course an S-tier game because it was innovative, it was just a classic, it had that good quality writing, and I don't think, let me just say this, I don't think Borderlands is peak quality writing. It's nowhere near as complicated or as in-depth as the lore in Fallout, for example, and the philosophical different factions fighting with each other. I made a whole breakdown of all of the factions in Fallout and their philosophies. If you are interested, I keep trying to shill that video because it underperformed so badly, and it's a good video in my opinion. But it's nowhere near as complicated, of course. But it still had much better writing. It degraded into literally making fun of streamers and YouTubers who were supposed to be promoting the game, Borderlands 3, and then, just terrible cringe writing, a lot of political messaging as well with some of the later games. It just went off, a cliff compared to what we got with Tales of the Borderlands, Borderlands 1, Borderlands 2, Jack being this, narcissistic but charismatic villain. It was just a great time, and all of these characters were, alive. They didn't just feel like, cardboard cutouts, with Lilith kind of getting a good character arc. Everything kind of peaked, and I feel like the same thing with the gameplay. But that's my own personal take, like I said. And then, of course, we got Borderlands 2, and that was, of course, S-tier because it was the first game, but even better, it just built upon the formula even more, and that's why everyone loved it. And around that time, if you're around my age, you were probably playing this with a good group of friends where you didn't have much responsibility and you could really grind this game. That's where it was the most fun. Now, it's just not as interesting because there's so many other looter shooters you could play, but back then it was still very fresh and one of the only type looter shooter multiplayer open world games that you could play back then. Then we're going to go with the pre-sequel. I really enjoyed this. It was a nice backstory. These three games were all interlinked with, Jack and, the rise of these corporations and vault hunting and all that stuff. Very cool themes. And like I said, the writing was still good. So I would give that an A tier. They also added really cool physics back then for the PC, which was pretty cool. Most people don't care, but I'm insane and I like that kind of thing. And then we got Tales from the Borderlands. I'm not exactly sure when they all came out, but anyway, this is S tier, of course, because of the world building, the writing. Then we got, I don't know what that is, Borderlands, just some kind of extra edition. I'll just put that there. Then we got Borderlands 3, which was, of course, for me, a disaster. I know a lot of people enjoyed it. I couldn't get through it just because of the main villains being absolute annoying douchebags, and I know that was kind of the point, but it just didn't land. And the world, the characters, they just weren't as interesting. You have to remember that Borderlands is a boss gauntlet to a degree. You go to a place, you fight a boss, you get the loot, you clear out a dungeon, you do some quests where you go to a place, you retrieve something, you activate something, you defend something. It's very simple in its gameplay loop, but what these games originally had were cool Easter eggs and, little callbacks and, fun little side areas like arenas and stuff like that. just to, change up the gameplay a little bit, which went a long way. Even this game had zero gravity and, managing your oxygen and stuff like that. So I just feel like after that, it just got very stale, to be honest. Then we got Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. I wasn't a fan of that. Then we got the new Tales of the Borderlands, which literally was a complete shit show compared to the first one. This is what I'm talking about when they started degrading the writing, the world building, and started to add more of the political messaging in their games. And I usually don't care about that kind of stuff, but why does it need to be included? Just for the sake of it around that time period, you know what I'm talking about. It just wasn't good. And then I have no idea what this is. So yeah, and actually I'm gonna put this D because yeah, it just wasn't great. And I know some people enjoy Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, but like I said, this is kind of where it kind of split off, the old original Borderlands and the new era of Borderlands, where none of them for me have really landed. And that's maybe just because I'm a boomer now. And yeah, I really hope a new generation picks up Borderlands. But Borderlands 4 has the potential just to be a mediocre kind of, in-between game, calling back to the original, but not quite as bad as the new era of Borderlands. Or it has the potential to be absolute dog crap, no innovations. Or if they really nail the themes and everything, it could bring it up to an A, but there's no way they can surpass because they just aren't adding anything new to the franchise. And that's my problem. That's why I wanted to make this video. That's why I feel like Borderlands 4 is in dire need. That's why I say that the Borderlands series is in decline, and why nobody cares about Borderlands 4. Nobody's excited to play Borderlands 4 from what I've seen. So many people are just saying that they're waiting for a sale to play the game, and just waiting for it in a couple of years to play with some mates. So please let me know what you think about the series of Borderlands down below in the comments. This is a very different type of video than I normally make, but I just wanted to try out something different here. So I do hope you liked it, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Have a great day. Peace out.
I had to reach up to get to the cherry on the top. Got it. Oh, in the mouth. It was lovely. I don't think it's funny. Miss Goodall was delighted, I was delighted, the inspector was delighted, and Haribo was still snorting away like mad. Dig in. That was a bit rich, but okay. Really good. I don't like it very much.
These companies are out of their minds. I'm already not paying $70 for a game, which is fair enough. Sure, I ain't paying $80. I'll wait for the sales. Most of these games are not worth $70 anymore. There are a few, but not the majority.
Gearbox created the looter shooter, right? Like, this is a game genre that this company founded, and they've been working on these games since 2009, I believe. Before that even, that's when the game released, but they've been thinking about looter shooters for over a decade. Back then it was a prototype of, I think it was just elevators going to different levels that would procedurally generate an environment and different weapons and enemies. But that was the proof of concept they were showing us, the loot loop, right? Like how there could be a gazillion guns in a shooter game.
Like, it's easy to have a million swords when the picture's the same and it's just the text that's different, right? It's just the variables that are different. But when you're holding the thing in your hand as a first-person model and you see it on the screen from the eyeballs of the character, like, there's an asset, there's a physical model there that has, like, so you can't build 100 of those, let alone a billion. Like, we made an AI in 2008 that would ingest what we gave it and be able to assemble. Back then we called it procedural generation.
Had free will out there in the myriad galaxies. But here, on Kairos, you serve the use I have for you.
Our minds fly free, beyond his control. Now, it's your turn.
I will return to the Timekeeper's side. May we rule forever.
Heard you were rounding up some vault hunters. Reporting for duty, boss.
Could it be? My savior?
Oh, vault hunters! This will hurt!
A toast to our hero.
Why should you get to be free? All you do is destroy. We lead a strike team to the fortress, and then we make him pay.